Stories matter. Who tells them matters. Up next, a conversation with Professor Jennifer Finney Boylan of Barnard College, a New York Times writer, a novel writer, a storyteller, and a transgender American. Ahead on Science Goes to the Movies. Welcome to Science Goes to the Movies, a look at the stories of science and how they change our culture. I'm Faith Saley, and I've opened the show about 50 times now with that line, a look at the stories of science and how they change our culture. And for this episode, we'd like to clarify what we mean by that. Stories are amazing and fun, and they're how we communicate with each other, how we rehearse or rehash our joys and our fears. And today, an expert in story, who happens to have a very fascinating one of her own, joins us to discuss how a good story makes individual experiences feel universal. My guest is Professor Jennifer Finney Boylan, the Anna Quindlen Writer-in-Residence at Barnard College and contributing opinion writer for the New York Times. Her most recent novel is Long Black Veil. Her 2003 memoir, She's Not There, A Life in Two Genders, was the first best-selling work by a transgender American. And today we're going to have a look at how pop culture storytelling reflects the realities of the transgender community. Jenny.
Hi, Faith.
I love reading you, and I love talking to you even more, so thank you for being here.
Faith Saley, it's incredible. Let's get to work.
It's happening. Okay, let's get to work, yes. So I think, unfortunately, most people's first sort of story of a trans person's journey might come to them through the lens of like Jerry Springer, or they conflate cross-dressing with being a transgendered person.
Yeah.
And some kind of uninformed misunderstanding. And so what I want to know is how important is good storytelling for our understanding of the trans community?
The great thing over the last decade or two is that there are more and more stories of trans people that are being told in the media. And they're being told a little bit better, a lot better in some cases than they used to be. I remember when I came out to my own dear mother, my 85-year-old Republican mother, she took me in her arms and she said that she loved me. And then she said this curious thing, which was, it's impossible to hate anyone whose story you know. And
wow.
She had spent her life selling books. She was a bookseller. And I think from the beginning, she understood that good storytelling helps to open hearts. We spend most of our lives with people who are not us and who have a view of the world that's very different from our own. So how do we understand the world of people who are different from ourselves? Well, stories are a good way to open hearts.
There have not been a lot of good movies about the trans community, but this year, A Fantastic Woman, written and directed by Sebastian Lelio, won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Film. And in it, Daniela Vega plays Marina Vidal, a whole person in the center of the movie.
Yo simplemente estoy protegiendo a mis seres queridos, nada más. Orlando es un ser querido para mí.
There's a scene in the movie that has a little bit of magic realism. Marina is beset by a wind so strong it nearly topples her, but she keeps moving forward, step by step, battling the forces intent on destroying her. So let's talk about the hero's journey, Jenny. As a storyteller, and you are a teacher of storytellers as well, would you say that humans need that heroic structure to viscerally understand a story?
Well, they don't need it, and because the story can be whatever the artist creates. But there is a reason why storytellers keep reverting to variations on that fundamental Joseph Campbell journey of the mythic hero. formula.
Which you would define as what?
Well, there's generally it's a 4-stage journey, beginning with a departure from the hero's home, and then a series of trials which test to see whether the hero is up to the challenge of becoming herself. And having passed the test, then she returns to the place where it all began, and she sets things to right. And I think for most storytellers, it's really that trial phase, the second stage of that journey, which is where most of the exciting stuff happens, because those are the challenges. That's where a lot of the plot points are. And so that is in life as well, where we find out whether or not we have the courage to become ourselves. I mean, everybody has a dragon to slay, right? Everybody has something that they have to do. There's something that stands between us and the people we want to become. And that's not unique to transgender people. That's everybody. The journey of life is this journey to find out whether you have the courage to be who you need to be, and whether you can slay the thing that is preventing you from being yourself.
It's so public with a transgender person.
It is public,
right?
and that's what can be awkward about it. And that's what I mean. Most other people suffer in silence or out of the public eye in some way. Well, if you're trans and you go through transition, people are often gonna see, and people who don't know anything about your soul or anything about who you are going to weigh in with their opinion on who you are, as if they know you better than you do. So that can be awkward indeed. And yet, if you have found this, going back to that Joseph Campbell thing, if you've found the moment of illumination, if you know your truth, then you have the superpower, and that truth will guide you.
In your novel, The Long Black Veil, you reference Theseus, who rebuilds his ship over time. And that kind of poses a philosophical question.
Oh, I love this.
Yes, what is it about that myth?
This is a game from Philosophy 101, but to make it quick and not any more boring than it has to be. Tiresias has a ship, he sails it on the sea, and when things break down on the ship, he replaces them. The sails, the masts, the planking on the deck, as they wear out. And in this puzzle, there's someone who is saving all the old pieces as they come off the ship, right? So after 10 years, all those old pieces have been reassembled into a ship, while meanwhile Theseus is sailing his ship on the sea. And there's two ships next to each other, and the puzzle is which is the true ship. So you can have fun with that. And the reason that it matters is because the way that puzzle is traditionally solved is to say the true ship of Theseus is the ship that Theseus sails. So why does this matter to us? It matters because this is a metaphor for the thing that we all go through in life. Are you, Faith Saley, right now, the person that you were when you were 10 years old?
Right.
Are you?
Only in some ways.
In some ways.
Right.
I mean, are you the person?
I would hesitate to brag. I've never changed, right?
Right. I mean, and let's think, if you have a marriage, let's say, and you've been married. Well, I will have been married 30 years this year to the woman that I married in my earlier life as a boy, or as a male, I guess some people would say. So you could say we were married 12 years as husband and wife and 18 years as wife and wife. Is that the same marriage? Well, no. But am I still me? Well, who else would I be?
Yeah.
So it's the marriage of Theseus, or it is, and I would ask people who are thinking about this question of identity to ask, how much does gender matter in terms of determining who someone is? What would have to change about a person that you love for them to be unrecognizable to you? If they changed their religion, would that make them someone else? If they lost their religion?
They changed their politics, right?
They changed their politics.
Right.
So, yeah, going from male to female was a big deal. But I wonder sometimes if it was nearly as big a deal as going from 30 to 60.
Yeah.
Which is another thing that I did.
Well, I've been in 2 marriages, and I can tell you I'm different in the second than I was in the first. So
You were different.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
right,
but not completely different.
But not completely different.
Happier.
Right.
I'm
No, these
hoping.
are. It's funny because you're happier indeed.
Yeah.
Your novel, The Long Black Veil, is a mystery novel, but there is also, I mean, there is a mystery at the heart of it. There is a murder, but there is also a mystery to the heroine of diving in and figuring
Right.
out the questions that you're posing. Like,
Well, this is the thing that heroes and heroines have to do. Usually there is an exterior mystery that has to be solved or a challenge that has to be overcome, but there's also something inside of themselves that they have to learn and conquer. And usually whatever that battle is inside is reflected in the thing outside. So that's the way we see what's going on in a human heart. If we can't read people's minds, we see them find the courage to learn the ways of the Force, or to find their courage, or to use their superpower, or to learn the secret of the magic ruby slippers. And with that, they can change the world. I lost my hearing, or a lot of my hearing, in the last couple of years, and I've been learning American Sign Language. And this is kind of cool. The ASL symbol for transgender people used to be this, which is sex turned around, so sex backwards. And that used to be the way we would think of transgender people, sex backwards. But there's a way in which that is now considered kind of uncool, and the new symbol is this. So it's like, here, and do this, Faith. It's make a little flower, put it over your heart there. Now it's going to come out, and as it comes out, the petals open, and then you put it back in your heart with the petals facing in the right direction.
oh
and
my
that,
gosh,
that's
that's
the
gonna make
thing.
me cry.
My mission is done here. No, but this is
Oh
what
my
we all
gosh.
do. I mean, that means transgender, but it means human. Is there anybody that you know who hasn't had something in their heart that, I know I'm an English teacher, but a flower that cannot open because it is in the dark, because it cannot be seen? You bring it out into the light, the flowers open, the petals open, and now it goes back. That's what it means to be human, and that's what it means to be trans.
Thank you for teaching me that,
Yeah.
Professor. There's a moment in the movie A Fantastic Woman when Marina stands in front of a wobbly mirror held up by 2 moving men. And as the mirror wobbles, Marina sees herself moving and morphing, and then suddenly, as the moving men start walking again, the image of herself totally disappears. In your opinion, Jenny?
Beautiful scene, by the way.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It visually calls so much into question. And my question is, in your opinion, how much of our sense of gender is based on what the mirror gives back to us or confirms for us?
Yeah, and how much of our sense of ourselves is based on what other people see?
Yes.
Because on the one hand, just like you were saying before, you are still you, because who else would you be? And yet you're someone else as well. When you look in the mirror, if it's a good hair day, you look in the mirror, you are fantastic. Are you really a better person? I mean, you might feel happier.
Right.
If you have some like horrible zit and you look in the mirror and you're like, oh God, does that mean you're not really a worse person? But what is on the outside it's not irrelevant to who we are, although maybe it should be.
Do you feel, so you were born transgender, which means you always felt like, or knew you were a girl?
I always did, but it's important to know that not all trans people know from day one. Sometimes the light goes on later on in life, and all those kind of ways of understanding yourself are valid.
So you look in the mirror and you see a woman, I see a woman, you are a woman. Do you feel more like who you are now because you look like a woman than who you were then, even though inside you were a woman?
Yeah, I do.
But you look like a man?
Yeah, I do, certainly. Being female for me was never about being pretty in particular. I know people for whom beauty and fashion are important things, and that is also valid. And actually, some of them are men, and some of them are women. But that's all cool. I mean, the thing about being trans is that there's so many different ways of being trans, and they really are all cool. For me, though, personally, it was really more about a physical thing. It was not about femininity per se. I never I never played with dolls. And, even now, after 20 years in this body, when I get home to Maine, one of the most fun things I can do is split wood. I don't spend a lot of time looking in the mirror. It's funny. Sometimes I think the biggest difference for me is not going from male to female. It's going from someone who had a secret to someone who doesn't have a secret. And so if I look in the mirror, the person that I see seems very familiar. What's changed is not only that I no longer have a secret, but also another thing, I look in the mirror and now there's someone who's nearly 60 years old. That's different because when I first went through transition, I was barely out of my 30s. I looked younger than that, and I was like, well, hello, Jenny Boylan. And so I think a lot of people, though, who are in middle age or even old age, you look in the mirror and you're like, who is that?
Yes.
So are we what we look like? We are, and we aren't.
In your memoir, you're very upfront about the steps you took to transition, or the steps anyone would take to transition between genders. And your description of the effects of male and female hormones is fascinating. It's hysterical. And it made me wonder just how much of what we think of as gender is based on the chemicals that our bodies produce or ingest.
Yeah, well, hormones do have a difference, make a difference. I mean, chemistry, without chemistry, gender itself would be impossible. Ha, ha, ha. But I think that the biggest thing that changed for me, other than, the kind of fat on my body moving around, and other things as well, I think the biggest difference was that I felt very vulnerable as a woman, and in some ways, I think that's hormonal. I think there's something about maleness that made me feel like I had this invisible shield, that stuff would just bounce off of me, and I think it's hormonal. That now things really get under my skin. If someone says something to me that hurts my feelings, I will brood on it. I will cry. And I mean, maybe it's not hormonal. Maybe it's just okay for me to express that now. I'm willing to have that conversation. But I do think that chemistry does, and hormones do affect the way you occupy your body. And the biggest difference for me physically is really just that sense of vulnerability. Also, I am vulnerable in the world now because now, well, maybe less so now, but even now at this age, I feel I feel unsafe in the world in a way that I didn't used to feel unsafe.
Because you're a woman?
Yeah, and if I'm walking home late at night and I hear footsteps behind me, I will know it, and I will go into what do you call it? Escape mode.
Fight or flight.
Just be ready to get out of there, I think about that. And back in the day, as I refer to the first half of my life, I just walked anywhere. I didn't care about it because I was 6 feet tall, and who was going to bother me?
Interesting. You're still 6 feet tall, but
I am.
taller in heels, lady. Maybe you're more intimidating.
Yeah. So I guess that is a thing I do feel living in the world. It's worth saying that no one goes from male to female because they think their life is going to get easier.
Wow.
There's a way in which being in the world is both harder and more dangerous for me now, but those dangers belong to me.
In your memoir, She's Not There, A Life in Two Genders, you talk about ginger pungent rituals. I love that phrase. And the superpower, you call it the superpower of being both genders. And now this book came out first in 2003. And then a decade later, in 2013, there was a significant revision and update. And so you've had a long time to think about this. So I need to know this. You talk about the salad thing, the wanting to lose weight, eating salad, wanting to talk about relationships, right? When you're on these female hormones. Is that cultural or hormonal?
Well, everything's
or
cultural.
Something
first
else
of all, everything is cultural. Well, just to take, I mean, there's a lot there, but I would certainly say food issues remain a thing that now, even now, I still fret over. But I really didn't used to. But in the first half of my life, I would pretty much eat anything, you know.
Men.
And often I would not gain much weight as a result because I had the metabolism of a hummingbird back in the day, and now I think about food. I think about weight, and in some ways, in a neurotic way that angers me. That there's a way in which I think my sense of, well, if being a woman means being really neurotic about my, body image and dieting all the time, let's do that because then I'll fit in. It was like I was trying to fit in by oppressing myself. So when I'm aware of this stuff, I fight back against it and I say, okay, well, you know what? I'm having the baby back ribs and a beer, right? And then that lasts until the next morning. And I'm like, oh my God, I gained 20 pounds in like one day. How's that possible? Like, well, welcome to the sisterhood.
Yeah, exactly. Towards the end of She's Not There, you quote one of your doctors who says, I'm paraphrasing, something like, those people who object to transsexuality, they wouldn't like it either if they had it. And that phrase, had it is what you use to refer to a medical condition, right? Like someone has cancer or has diabetes. Is transsexuality a medical condition or behavioral or psychological
Well,
condition?
it's all of those things. And it's funny because transsexuality as a word is a word that we're using less and less because it is, I think, a particularly medicalized view of, what he said, the condition. It sounds like, I've got diabetes.
Yeah.
Being trans it's a lot of things. For some people, it really is a medical condition that is cured by a trip to the doctor. For other people, it's a kind of a cultural transgression. It's a way of breaking the kind of strict binary sense of having to live in the world in this binary way, with all the men over there eating steak and all the women over there eating salad. For other people, it's about fantasy. It's about having a kind of different kind of self you can go to kind of have a vacation. And for other people, it's just about being fabulous. And so it is all of those things. And we have to accept that this is why it's so hard to be a good trans ally, because if someone says I'm trans, or if you experience someone who seems to be messing with gender, what their goals are and what their dreams are may not be necessarily knowable to you unless you know them better, unless you open your heart to them and have a conversation. And so, how do you come to know a trans person? What do you do? Open your heart. And it sounds so easy, and I know it's not easy, but in some ways, isn't that what we do to anyone who has a difference?
Yeah.
And is there anybody that you know in some way who doesn't have some kind of difference? What do we do? I mean, I'm glad for people to learn the science and to see the films. And that's what shows like this are so great at making people understand this very complex set of both psychological, medical, and cultural truths. But if you can't do all that, if you want to do it real quick, you want to live in the world in a better way, open your heart. Life is this incredibly difficult journey, this amazing challenge, a set of challenges we go through. And I think that's something that writers do. We try to take the everyday, the quotidian, and raise it up to the level of the mythological.
In your memoir, She's Not There, you share emails from your colleague and friend, Richard Russo.
Russo.
Yeah, and he has this understanding of real life through story, and he expresses it in a way that just it made the center of my chest hurt when he compares you to a
rough draft.
A poorly written story. And I know from your other books that you're friends again, but Jenny, how did you find it in your heart to forgive him?
Well, it wasn't really about forgiveness. I think he was telling me, he might have been telling me a truth about myself at the time that I didn't particularly want to hear, because I was I was like a rough draft in this sense that I was not yet my best self. And as a writer, I understand about revision. That's what we do. We're trying to create in life the best draft of the self. We go through a lot of drafts as writers and as humans. There was a little bit of brittleness between Rick and me for a while, but in the end, he came around. Fortunately, I didn't close my heart to him. I kept my heart open, and I understood what he was trying to say, and I think he came better to understand who I was. It's funny. So he has a new collection of essays, and the book contains the epilogue which he wrote to She's Not There. He wrote me the other day, and he said he noticed that his book of essays, for some reason, for some kind of weird quirk of classification, has been classified as the #1 transgender memoir on Amazon. And he said, "Eat your heart out." And I just responded, "Russo, welcome to the sisterhood."
You guys have to go have salads.
Yes, that's right.
Jenny, thank you.
Faith.
Thank you for opening my heart. When I put it back in, does the flower go back in this way?
Goes up.
Oh, good.
Facing the right way.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Faith. This was really cool.